So let's do the annual planning stuff.
Let's
I'm
do
going
it.
through my annual planning just now. And I've been doing this since, when did I start? I think I started in 2015. So when I turned the podcast host into a company, and I decided I wanted to try and be a bit more organized about what I was thinking, what I was trying to do over a year. And I've gone through a whole bunch of different systems. And I'll mention some of them, but no doubt some I won't even remember that I've looked at and I've kind of borrowed parts from. And I've kind of got this hodgepodge of a system that I've ended up with these days. And it goes through a couple of different stages. Like one part of it is, and I think I've mentioned this before on the show, but it's one of the things that I think is the most important thing I do every single week during my planning, which is to take an hour on a Monday morning and think about my week ahead and think about the week just gone and write a little journal entry on it. And this doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't even need to be more than a couple of sentences. It's just a way of getting something out of your head around what happened and your reflections on it. And usually I start with just a couple of sentences, but I end up writing a few paragraphs and I get some really useful things out of it because I think a lot of people end up, you think quite clearly by writing, like it kind of forces you to think. Is that your experience?
Definitely. Yeah. It's easy to get stuck in a rut in your mind, but when you put it on paper, you can kind of pick it apart, can't you?
Yeah.
You can start to notice what went wrong, what went right.
Yeah.
If you're just thinking about it. Because you can be too emotional in your brain as well, is what I find.
Yeah.
When I write it down, it allows me to be quite objective.
That's a nice way of putting it, actually. It's a way of processing in a kind of more analytical way. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I do that every Monday. But, and so that actually like hugely helps me every single week. Again, I've talked about that. But the thing that it does for me, even wider sort of in terms of personal development, professional development, is that every year, that's the start of my annual review, is to just read through that whole thing. So I go through every single week and I read it all. And I have a notebook beside me. I sometimes use a Google Doc, sometimes paper, whatever it is, but I note down anything that I note as themes. So something that pops out is like anything that appears more than once or twice that I talk about, I note down, oh, there's a theme there around focus. There's a theme there around managing the team. There's a theme there around like creating this thing, but never quite getting where I want to or whatever it is. So, and I always end up with this document, maybe 2 or 3 pages in a Google Doc, which reflects on everything that I've noticed through the past year. And I found that really useful. Like that itself is kind of the basis for my retro every single year, trying to spot what happened, what actually really happened last year when you look at the big picture. And it's funny the things that pop out when you look at it as the big picture, read through a full year's worth of thoughts in one go. And you can kind of look back, you can step back, be, again, like you say, a bit more objective, a bit more analytical about it. Just as an example, like something that popped out in this last year. So I was doing this just yesterday. And something that came out as really obvious reading it yesterday, but obviously wasn't that obvious in the mix and the mess and the fires and the everything that was happening during the last year, was that I was just not managing my Asana in any way the right way. So I mentioned this a bunch of times, like maybe 5 to 10 times during the year, like, oh, I've had to move, like, so my Asana feels a bit overloaded this week, but I think I can manage it. I think I fit this in and this in. And then the next week I'd be like, all right, no, I carried over this. And I looking back, I remember myself like dragging tasks from one week to the next constantly in Asana the whole time. And one of the problems I have, I'm sure many people identify with this, is that, you have so many ideas and that's where I put my ideas. I pop them into the week or I pop them into next week in Asana as a task and I put a date on it because it's the only way that I review it. But I realized, just having read my journal from last year, that has just completely failed me in the last year and I need to come up with a new system. So as an example, again, like I realized that only through reading it, even though I was in that, like I saw that happening every single week. I would write about it, but I just didn't see it as a huge problem. I would just move things. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't see the pattern because I was just, every week I would come back to it and I would move some stuff and it would feel fine because I'm just moving it another week and I would maybe get it done the next week. It's fine. But it wasn't. It was a pattern, like you say, and it happened all the time. So I need a new system. And so I'm going to completely overhaul how I use Asana now. And this applies to any task management system. I'm going to have a different space for ideas, essentially. And my calendar in Asana, my calendar view, is going to only contain very realistically 1 or 2 tasks per day, and they are the most important tasks of that day. And so that week, when I look at it, will actually be like a real week, a realistic week, a focused week. And if I do finish the things, excellent. I'll go and have a look at the backlog. So I'm going to have a backlog of things, which are things that are kind of on hold, not really that important, but are there. I want to be able to remember it. I'm going to have an ideas log, an inbox as well. This kind of goes back to getting things done, GTD as well, actually. I'm going to have an inbox for those ideas. And then every week, I'm going to check the inbox so that I can deal with it, put it somewhere for maybe the next cycle or this cycle. And then I'm going to, every month or every cycle, at least check the backlog as well to make sure I'm not missing any big ideas that have suddenly become relevant. So there's a big kind of thing that came out of my review that I'm going to change a lot of the process of how I manage my weeks based on that. So that's just one example though. Like there's so many things I've changed or done or implemented over the years, having read through that last year's worth of stuff.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Are those ideas that you're kind of moving around and you're now putting into a new separate inbox, are those related to the things that you've actually planned out for your week, for your cycle? Or are those kind of just sort of nice to have things that are unrelated? Like what was it? Was it distracting you from what you'd kind of set out to do, or was it just additional things to do with those things that you set out to do? Does that make sense?
It was a bit of both, really. Yeah,
Right.
Sometimes it was like extra ideas to pile on top of the really relevant active projects that were going on. And sometimes it was completely different new things that I was like, oh, that'd be a great thing to do. Maybe it's part of the problem being a content consumer at the same time as a content creator. I listen to a lot of podcasts from people that do the similar kind of things as us and read a lot of blogs and newsletters. And so there's always things that come out of these bits of content that I want to do for us, but you just can't do them all. So, yeah. But so many of them feel really relevant, really important, really impactful. But it's just, it always comes back to that. I almost get bored talking about it. In fact, I wrote this in my journal. I read this just yesterday. 1 week I wrote, I'm really bored of writing this, but focus. I'm kind of genius.
Yeah, but
I'm
it's
doing
probably
too
the
many
time you
things. Yeah, I'm doing too many things, too many parallel things right now. So yeah, it's really tricky though. It's really hard to do. But yeah, I do find that it focuses my mind when I read back that stuff and read like how I struggled through it. So that's one thing. Yeah. So I hope that's a useful practice. But from that, there's a set of questions. I'll go through them. I'll sort of run through them here quickly. There's a few questions here. So firstly, I go through questions like what 2 or 3 major themes kept coming up again last year. So I've reviewed my journal, and then I'll pick out, I'll go through a few questions, one of which is what are the major ones? Like what are 2 or 3 things that I need to think about? What accomplishments am I most proud of? I think it is worth taking the time to look back at that. And then even like, what do you feel you should have been acknowledged for? I find this is a good question actually for taking that accomplishment and taking something that you think, I did do something really well there, and making sure you acknowledge yourself for it, thinking through what disappointments or regrets did I experience last year, because that's no doubt going to inform your plan for the coming year. What was missing from life last year as well, like really thinking through what am I going to do this year to make it better, more pleasant, more pleasurable, more fun. And that can be personal or professional, or probably both, to be honest. And then what were the major life lessons from last year as well? Like what am I going to take and actually try and implement? And they kind of focus my thinking around the themes that I've taken out of the journal. Another couple of things that I do often, this comes from Fizzle. Do you remember Fizzle? I don't know if they were even still around. There's a community called Fizzle, which were around building a business. In fact, Caleb Wojcik, who's now CEO of SPI, I think, used to be part of the Fizzle crew. There was 2 other guys, struggle to remember their names, but they were really good. They created great content, ran a great community, and one of their annual activities was to sit down and do 3 things. They do just a simple brain dump, so just get a massive big bit of paper and dump all the things that they could do this coming year, and then take all of those things and find some that are a list of things to say yes to. And this could go wider as well. So it could go beyond activities. It could go beyond that into like, I'm going to say yes to more speaking engagements this year. But then you also have a list to say no to. So, but I know that actually going to events is draining for me and it takes too much time and too much money. So I'm going to say no to in-person events and I'm only going to do virtual ones. So having that list of yeses and nos makes it really clear when something comes up that's going to take up more of your time, whether it's an activity, whether it's an ask from somebody, it helps you much more easily make that decision as well. So I really like that. And I often find some really interesting things come out of that when I think about it as well. Like when I look back at my calendar and I then do, so the next thing actually is the 2080 analysis. So thinking about, and this comes from Tim Ferriss. So what 20% of activities, experiences, or people caused 80% of my negative emotions or outcomes? So there's always like a kind of small proportion of things that actually cause you the biggest bother or the biggest negatives or the biggest kind of pit in your stomach feeling, I don't want to do this. And equally, the opposite way around, what 20% of activities, experiences, people produced 80% of my most positive emotions and outcomes. And that can really inform that list of things to say no to, things to say yes to, and really help you to figure out a focus for your plan, your focus, your, really what you want to lean into this coming year. So those three things I found really useful. I'll pop them in the description. So if you're out there listening, you want to do any of these, I'll pop those questions, those activities into the description for you. But that's a really simple structure that I find actually covers most of what you need to do to actually start to think about a really solid plan for the coming year.
I'm going to have to steal it. In fact, I'm going to download the audio and go back and listen to you because, I don't have a structure at all. I don't have a structure for that at all. And I've been trying to do that over the last week or so. And there's some really good questions in there and really good prompts.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
No worries. Yeah. Just, I wasn't going to actually share this, but I'm just thinking maybe it's useful. So really quickly as well, the next stage that I go through often is to take that and you create your new themes for the next year. So, you've talked about what themes were kept recurring last year. Think about what themes you want to actually come up in the coming year. And start noting them down. Like, what do you want your themes to be? In 12 months' time, you look back, what do you want your themes to be? And then that actually is really important around creating goals because your goals are probably going to be really closely related to those themes. And I often group my goals in amongst those themes. So one of the themes might be, I want to actually just have more maker time. So I want to make more things. And then you have a couple of goals in there, like publish 2 things a week and here and over there. And so it helps to inform the real detail of your goals. And a big part of that as well is once you've got that is actually scheduling in dates in your calendar to review these things, like come back and look at the themes again. Like I talked about not noticing that Asana problem. That was partly my fault. It was not partly, it was all my fault, but it should have been solved earlier. I should have had in my calendar, and I failed to do this year. I've done it in years past, but I realized as I did my journal review at the end of the year, I didn't actually schedule in my sort of quarterly or even 6-monthly review to go back and do this. So I'm going to make sure to do that this coming year. And with that, I often actually get this stuff all printed out, put it up on the wall. And I have done in the past that when we had our Dundee office, it was plastered with all of our goals and our themes and everything was all in the walls there. So I found that really useful. I find it, it's great to have stuff on digital. I put things in Notion and Evernote and all these kind of places, but there's nothing beats having a bit of paper on the wall to really focus your thoughts and make sure you're reminded all the time.
Yeah, that's really cool. Or alternatively, get a VR headset and take it with you everywhere.
Yeah.
I played about that over Christmas.
Really?
Yeah, you can set up a workspace that you can take with you anywhere, which is like that. It's like having it on the wall, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that'd be cool.
I tried that out actually with my son had a Meta Quest for a while, and I tried that. I tried the virtual workspaces. I just couldn't get used to the sweatiness and the heaviness of having the thing in my face for any length of time. But I could see like once they get lighter, once they get better, even just like
once
a pair of glasses.
Sunglasses. Yeah,
absolutely.
that'd be great.
Yeah, cool. All right, yeah, that's it though. I'll like I said, I'll pop that in the description for anyone that wants to use it.
Before we move on, though, you mentioned at the start something about separating out your personal and your sort of professional goals. quite interested in that because I struggle with that myself.
Yeah, I don't think there's an easy answer to this. I think when I was just working by myself, it was all one and the same. I kind of had, there would maybe be more themes. So part of the theme was to, maybe a theme might be to have more fun time in my week, like not just reserve that for the weekend or something like that. And therefore, I would maybe have like it could relate to taking a half day to go cycling or something during the week. But equally, it could also include like a goal to do that once a month, like to take a day off during the week, because what else is the point in taking on the risk of working for yourself and all the bad things that come with that, if not to enjoy the flexibility? So like having a goal to actually take a day off a month to just go and do that during the week. But equally, it could also relate to professional in that I just want to try a new project once every couple of weeks, like take an afternoon to just make something new that's actually not maybe related to my channel, but it's just flexing my creative muscles or whatever, just to try something different. Like I had something related to this a while back, where I started like playing around with making music and things like that a few years back,
Yeah.
because it was just like, it was related enough to professional, but it develops your creative sort of sense, your skills, all that kind of stuff. It came back to your work. But so I think when I was working by myself, that's how I did it. I would have it all in the one place. But nowadays, because I'm planning with you guys, so like I, and Matthew are going to plan our content stuff for the podcast host, I can't really do it by myself anymore. So, yeah, I find it a little bit more tricky in that way. But I can think about it in my own work. Like I can still think about the kind of work that I want to do. I can think about the way I want to balance my weeks. I can think about, my professional goals, as in any skills I want to develop or any goals I want to achieve, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I've not separated it out in the last few years. I've had it all one and the same. But bigger company goals do come kind of more differently. Stuff that I think maybe that's the way that I think about it, is anything that involves the team is part of the company planning process, which I do with you guys. And anything that is literally just work that I do personally goes into my personal planning. And that is personal and professional, but it's my own personal work as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, there could be better ways to do it, but that's the way I've found so far.
Yeah. I think for most creators, though, they will probably still be at that stage where it is one and the same, isn't it? It is starting that creator business is a deeply personal thing. So it makes sense. It's all going to be kind of mixed in, but yeah,
it is. Yeah,
it reaches a point.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so much as a creator, the business is you as well as the personality. You're part of the content. You're part of it all. So it's like, yeah, maybe, I mean, there'll be people out there who are creating like travel channels. And so their goals might be to visit 12 countries. And that's a personal goal, but it's, that's utterly part of their business.